I know what you have been doing. How long?
You were never enough. Look at you.
After everything I gave you.
My family will never accept you. You do not belong here. This has nothing to do with you. Walk away. Let her go. Do you know who you are talking to? Last time.
My family will never accept you. His voice cut through the music like a blade. The laughter died. The glasses stopped clinking. The entire room turned. Shin Junho's hand was twisted into Yemi's blouse. Not quietly, not privately, deliberately. His knuckles white, his jaw tight, his voice loud enough for every single person in that room to witness every single word. You are too black for my world. Look at you. My family will never sit at a table with you. They will never accept you. They will never accept this. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Yemi stood there, the woman who had loved this man with everything she had, who had cooked for him, defended him, poured years of herself into him without ever measuring what she was losing. And now she stood in the middle of a room full of people and felt every single one of them watch her break. At a separate table, a man sat perfectly still, dark eyes that did not blink, blonde streaks cutting through dark hair, tattoos on his neck, a glass of whiskey untouched between his fingers. The people sitting closest to him had shifted their chairs away without realizing it. And right now those eyes were locked entirely on Yemi. Only on her. Yemi's fingers reached up slowly. She uncurled Shin Junho's hand from her blouse one finger at a time. She straightened her clothes. She lifted her chin and walked outside alone into the cold Seoul night. The man at the separate table watched her go. Then, without a single word to anyone, he set his glass down and followed her. But what Yemi did not know was that this man had been watching her long before tonight, and he had already decided something about her that she was not going to like. Wherever you are watching this right now, drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far a story about a woman who was grabbed, humiliated, and left bleeding in public, and still rose into something untouchable, can travel across this world. And if this story found you at a moment when someone made you feel like you were too much, too loud, too different, not enough, then you already know you cannot leave this video. Because what happens next to Yemi is not just a story. It is a reminder that the same hands that tried to break you can never hold what you become. Subscribe, stay close, because we are just getting started. The cold hit her the moment she stepped outside. Seoul does not comfort you. It does not slow down for your pain. It moves, relentless, indifferent, blazing with light that carries no warmth. And it leaves you standing in the middle of it with whatever you brought out into it, pressing against your chest, like something alive. Yemi pressed her back against the outer wall of the venue and wrapped her arms around herself and breathed. In, out. She would not cry here. Not in this cold, not where anyone stepping outside for air could find her with her chest cracked open and her face telling the truth she had spent 3 years keeping carefully managed and controlled and presentable. She would not give Seoul that. She would not give him that. Too black for his world. The words moved through her on a loop, not fading the way words are supposed to fade when you tell yourself they do not matter, but deepening, settling into the spaces between her bones like something that had decided to stay. She had heard worse from strangers, had navigated 3 years of career and knew exactly what it felt like to walk into rooms where her presence created a particular discomfort that nobody named out loud. She had built something functional around that knowledge, had learned to carry it. But this came from the mouth of the man who had held her face in his hands and called her extraordinary. The man whose mother she had cooked for every birthday without being asked, whose fears she had absorbed at 2 a.m. without complaint, whose confidence she had quietly rebuilt every single time the world knocked it loose. That man, in that voice, that steady, rehearsed, unbothered voice. The door behind her opened. Footsteps, even, unhurried. The kind that belonged to someone who had never once in their life needed to rush because things came to them, or were brought to them, or simply understood that they had no reasonable alternative. She turned expecting Seoyeon, her best friend, The one person at that gathering who would have followed her out without hesitation. The one face she could have, absorbed without completely coming undone right here on this pavement. It was not Seo-yeon. The man from the separate table stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, dark eyes on her face, tattoos at his neck. The blonde in his hair caught the light spilling from the entrance behind him, and he stood in it without adjusting, without performing anything, simply present in the specific way that certain people occupy space, fully, heavily, in a way that changed the temperature around them without asking permission. He did not ask if she was all right. He did not manufacture sympathy or reach for the carefully arranged expression people wear when they stumble across someone else's pain and need to signal the right response. He looked at her for a long moment. Then, "I need a secretary." Yemi stared at him. "The hours are not reasonable. The work is not clean. But the pay is enough, and I do not ask questions that are not my business." Something about the absolute nerve of it, standing outside a gathering where she had just been publicly destroyed, being offered employment by a stranger who had watched every second of it happen, cracked something loose in her chest that was almost close to a laugh. Almost. "I do not know you," she said. "Ryu Hyunjae," he said, like a name was a complete answer. Like the world reorganized itself around names like his without being asked. "Go back inside," she said. He held her gaze for one more beat, long enough to mean something, short enough to deny it, then reached into his jacket and placed a business card on the ledge beside her, without touching her hand, and without another word turned and walked back through the venue doors. The night folded back around her. She stared at the card on the ledge, picked it up, told herself it was only to throw it away properly later. She did not throw it away. The weeks that followed hollowed her out in ways that surprised her with their quiet. Not dramatic damage. Not the visible kind that people respond to with food and careful voices, and the particular gentleness reserved for fresh grief. The quiet kind. The kind that lives inside ordinary moments. In the kitchen that stopped smelling like anything. In the bed that felt architecturally wrong for one body. In the mirror that showed her a face she recognized completely and could not locate herself behind it all. Yemi stopped cooking. That was the one that told her the true scale of it. Cooking had been her mother's language, and her grandmother's inheritance and her own private form of prayer. The place she went when the world needed making sense of, when grief needed somewhere to go, when joy needed marking. The kitchen going cold meant something essential had gone cold beneath it. She lost weight she did not have to lose. Her clothes began fitting differently. Her collarbones appeared with a prominence that her mother would have noticed immediately and wept over quietly. She would stand in front of the open refrigerator for whole minutes, not seeing anything inside it, not hungry, not anything, just standing there with the cold air washing over her face because it was the closest available substitute for feeling. Sleep came in broken pieces and departed before finishing anything. She surfaced at 3 a.m. with Shin Jun-ho's voice playing back at full clarity. That steadiness, that rehearsed ease, the way he had delivered her destruction with the calm of someone reading from a prepared document. And she would lie in the dark and press her palm flat against her chest, like she was holding something in that kept insisting on getting out. The apartment felt wrong, too quiet in the ways it had never been quiet before. She had lived alone for 2 years, and had never found the silence hostile until now. Now it pressed. Seo-yeon came every single day. She brought food in containers and arranged them in the refrigerator with the quiet efficiency of someone who loved a person, enough to show up when showing up changed nothing visible. She sat beside Yemi on the couch and held her hand through the long, terrible silences that stretched between them like something physical. She said the right things in the right order, that Shin Jun-ho was a coward wearing confidence like a borrowed coat, that his words were the confession of a man too small to hold a woman built the way Yemi was built, that she was going to survive this, and then surpass it, and then become something Shin Jun-ho would never deserve to witness. Yemi heard all of it, nodded in the right places, felt almost none of it reach the place inside her where the damage actually lived. She found work at a small convenience store 3 streets from her apartment because her savings had started bleeding in a direction that could not be ignored, and she needed hours to fill before the silence in them swallowed her entirely. She smiled at customers, made correct change, restocked shelves at the end of her shift with the careful attention of a person performing normalcy for an audience that was not watching. She took the long way home because arriving back at the apartment too early meant too many hours alone with the particular quality of quiet that had moved in since Shin Jun-ho and showed no signs of vacating. The card sat on her nightstand, 6 days before she moved it to the drawer. 11 more days in the drawer before she took it out again at 2:30 in the morning with her lamp on and her knees drawn to her chest, and her heart doing something it had no rational justification for doing. She typed Ryu Hyunjae into her phone. The results loaded. She put the phone face down on the mattress, sat in the silence of what she had just seen. Ryu Hyunjae was not a businessman in any sense that word was designed to carry. He was the kind of name that surfaced in articles that disappeared within days of publication. The kind that other powerful men spoke only in rooms where they were absolutely certain about every person present. The organization that moved around him had no registered name, no traceable address, and had never been successfully prosecuted for anything, which was itself a specific kind of answer about the nature of power that did not need courts, because it did not recognize their jurisdiction over it. Yemi sat with this for a long time. Then she thought about Shin Jun-ho's voice, the steadiness of it. She called the number in the morning. The building was in Gangnam and announced nothing about itself. Clean lines, tinted glass. A lobby so controlled in its quiet that the silence felt actively maintained. The way a weapon is maintained, with attention, intention, and zero sentiment attached to the process. A woman at the front desk looked at Yemi with professional neutrality and led her to an elevator without asking her name. The 14th floor opened into a corridor that felt less like an office environment and more like a decision point. The kind of hallway you understand, walking down it, that you are choosing something by the act of walking, and that the choosing cannot be reversed by simply leaving. The office at the end was large and stripped of everything unnecessary. Ryu Hyunjae stood at the floor-to-ceiling window with his back to the door, and his hands clasped loosely behind him, looking out at Seoul, the way a man looks at something that has already acknowledged who it belongs to. He did not turn when she entered. She stood in the doorway and did not announce herself, and they stayed exactly like that. Him at the window, her at the door, the entire spread of the city visible in the glass between them, for long enough that it stopped being silence and became something deliberate. She understood what it was. She did not move. He turned. His face did what it had done outside the venue. Nothing she could name or use. He looked at her the way you look at something that has arrived precisely when expected. No performance of surprise, no warmth arranged for the occasion. "You came," he said. "I have conditions," she said. Something shifted behind his eyes. Not a smile. The particular sharpening of attention that happens when something becomes interesting. "Sit," he said. "I will stand," she said. "You do not speak to me about anything before I walked through this door. No sympathy, no questions about my personal life. You tell me what this work requires and what it pays, and I give you a yes or a no." He looked at her for a moment that lasted longer than it needed to. "The work is everything," he said. "You manage my schedule, my correspondence, my meetings, and the information that moves through this office. You will see things requiring complete silence. You arrive before me. You leave after me. You do not ask questions I have not invited." "And if I have questions you have not invited," she said. "Then you decide whether the answer is worth what asking costs you," he said. The air in the room was doing something Yemi chose not to examine closely. He told her the number. She kept her face completely still, even though it was more than double what she had been making, and more than she had any right to expect from a man who had offered her this job outside a party, while her eyes were still burning with everything Shin Jun-ho had left behind. "In writing," she said. "My lawyer will have it to you by this evening," he said. "Then yes," she said. She turned to leave. "Yemi," he said. She stopped, turned back slowly. "Monday," he said. She left without answering. In the elevator going down, she pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes for 3 full seconds, and told herself the thing moving through her chest was nothing beyond relief at having solved the most immediate problem. She almost believed it. Monday arrived dressed like an ordinary day. She was wrong about that. She came in at 7:45. He was already there, not at his desk, at the window, standing with his back to the room the way he had stood on the day she first walked in, like a man who owned everything he could see and was simply deciding what to do with it next. He did not turn when she entered. She did not announce herself. She sat down, opened her laptop, started working. 45 seconds later, he walked past her desk without a word and disappeared into his office and closed the door. That was it. That was their entire first interaction on her first day. She told herself it meant nothing. She was wrong about that too. The work hit her like a wall from the first hour. Not loud, not dramatic, just constant. The specific kind of relentless that finds every weakness in a person and presses on it until something gives. His schedule mutated without warning. His correspondence involved names she recognized from the kind of news that disappeared within days of being published. His meetings required her to be present, invisible, and completely alert simultaneously, a combination that broke most people within a week. She did not break. She delivered everything, every document, every call, every briefing. And he said absolutely nothing about any of it. Not one word of acknowledgement, not one correction, not one indication that he had registered what she was doing or how well she was doing it. By day 3, she understood what he was doing. He was waiting for her to need something from him. Approval. Validation. A sign that she was welcome in his space. He had seen it in everyone who worked for him, that specific human hunger for acknowledgement from the most powerful person in the room. She did not give it to him. She did not need it. And that, she realized on day 4 when she caught him watching her from his office doorway for the 3rd time that morning, was the thing that had cracked something open in his attention. He had not expected her indifference. Nobody was ever indifferent to Ryu Hyunjae. The 2nd week was when the first real test arrived, not a professional one. She was managing back-to-back calls on a Tuesday morning, 3 simultaneous threads, none of them simple, when a man she had never seen before walked past her desk and straight into Ryu's office without knocking. She ended the first call, kept the 2nd running, stood up. She knocked once on Ryu's office door and opened it. Ryu was standing at his desk. The man, older, broad-shouldered, the kind of face that had stopped performing warmth decades ago, was seated across from him. Both of them looked at her. "This meeting was not on the schedule," she said. The man looked at Ryu with an expression that asked a question without words. Ryu looked at Yemi. Said nothing. 15 minutes notice for all future unscheduled visits, she said, regardless of who they are. She closed the door, went back to her desk, picked up the 2nd call exactly where she had left it. Her hands were not shaking. The man left 20 minutes later without looking at her. Ryu appeared in his office doorway shortly after. He stood there with his hands in his pockets and his dark eyes on her face. "Do you know who that was?" he said. "No," she said. "He runs the largest private security network in South Korea," he said. "He has never once in 15 years been told he needed to schedule an appointment." She held his gaze. "There is a first time for everything," she said. Something shifted in his face. Not a smile. Something adjacent to it that disappeared before it finished arriving. He went back into his office. A message came through the internal system 4 minutes later. It said, "Noted." 2 words. She stared at them on her screen, then went back to work. The document came back the following week with a single line. "This is insufficient," and nothing else. She walked into his office without knocking. "Tell me specifically what is insufficient or annotate it yourself," she said. "I do not revise in the dark." He looked up. The silence that stretched between them was the kind that gets measured. "The 3rd section," he said. "The language is imprecise. In this work, imprecision costs people things they cannot get back." "Then give me the standard before you give me the task," she said. She picked the document up and walked out. The door closed behind her with a quiet that said everything a slam would have said. She heard nothing from him for the rest of that day. The following morning, the document sat on her desk with annotations. Precise. Thorough. exactly what she had asked for. She revised it and returned it without comment. He received it without comment. And somewhere inside that silence between them, something was being built. Slowly, without ceremony, without either of them acknowledging it, that was more structural than warmth and more dangerous than either of them was prepared for. It was late on a Thursday evening of that same week when her phone buzzed on her desk. Unknown number. She picked it up. 4 words on the screen. You should leave now. She stared at it, read it again, put the phone face down on her desk and sat very still for exactly 30 seconds, doing the mathematics of what 4 words from an unknown number meant in a building like this one, attached to a man like him. Then she picked the phone up and walked to his office door and knocked. He opened it immediately. She held the phone up so he could read the screen. His face did the thing she had seen it do once before, that cold, calculating recalibration that had nothing readable on the surface and everything dangerous underneath. He took the phone from her hand, made 1 call, short, 3 sentences in Korean, then looked at her. Who else has seen this? He said. No one, she said. I came directly to you. He handed the phone back. Do not go to your apartment tonight, he said. I am not moving because of 4 words from an unknown number, she said. You are not moving because of 4 words, he said. You are moving because I know who sent them. The air in the room changed. Who? She said. Not yet, he said, when I am certain. She stood in his office doorway and felt the specific chill of understanding that she had walked into something much larger than a job offer, made outside a party on a cold Seoul night. How long have you known something was wrong? She said. Long enough, he said. She looked at him. Tomorrow, she said. You tell me everything tomorrow. Tomorrow, he said. She went back to her desk, picked up her bag, and stayed. It was on the Wednesday of the following week that everything fell completely apart. She'd been working late, past 8, the floor quiet around her, the Seoul night pressing blue against the windows, when Ryu's office door opened slightly. Not all the way, just enough. His voice came through the gap, low, speaking Korean. She understood every word, and what she heard made her set her pen down very carefully on her desk and sit very still. He was talking about her, not about her work, not about her performance, about her life before she walked through his door. He knew about the convenience store. He knew about the apartment. He knew about the night of the gathering before she had ever called the number on his card. He knew about Shin Jun-ho, not the way someone knows gossip, the way someone knows facts they gathered deliberately, facts they had been holding for a long time. She sat at her desk and breathed through the understanding arriving slowly and completely. The specific cold clarity of a woman realizing that nothing about the last 3 weeks had been coincidence. The office door opened fully. He stopped when he saw her face. He knew immediately that she had heard. They looked at each other across the office floor, the Seoul night blazing through the windows behind him, the silence between them enormous. And neither of them moved. How long? She said, her voice completely level. He was quiet for a moment. Long enough, he said. The job offer that night, she said. You already knew who I was. He did not deny it. Why? She said. He looked at her for a long moment and said, because someone was already watching you, and I needed to reach you before they did. The air in the room changed completely. Who? She said. I am still confirming, he said. That is not an answer, she said. No, he said. It is not. She stood up. Tomorrow, she said. Everything. All of it. Tomorrow, he said. All of it. She picked up her bag and walked to the elevator, rode it down alone, stood in the lobby with her back against the wall and her eyes open, and her mind running through 3 weeks of moments that had just rearranged themselves into a completely different shape. He had known. He had known from the beginning. And standing in that lobby with the Seoul night outside the glass, the thing she felt was not betrayal. It was something far more complicated than that. Something that frightened her far more than betrayal ever could. Until the Thursday evening that changed things. The building had emptied. Yemi was still at her desk working through a correspondence backlog. The Seoul night pressing blue against the windows. the floor quiet around her. She had her shoes off under the desk and a half-drunk cup of tea going cold beside her keyboard, and she was so deep inside the work that she did not hear them until they were already on the floor. 3 men, not staff. The way they moved through the corridor said everything about what they were before a word was spoken. Loose, unhurried, carrying the particular ease of people who had never arrived anywhere without already knowing the outcome. Ryu's head of security met them in the hallway. What followed was not a conversation. The first punch landed badly, and then everything collapsed into the violence that happens in tight spaces. Fast, brutal, close quarters, furniture catching bodies, glass from the side table exploding across the floor, the sounds that flesh and bone make when they meet surfaces that do not yield. Yemi rose from her desk, and her first instinct pulled her toward the door. Her second instinct, the sharper one, pulled her back. Assess first, move second. Ryu Hyunjae came out of his office. She had catalogued him across weeks, had seen every professional register he operated in, cold, exacting, commanding, dangerous in the particular manner of men who never needed to announce the danger, because the danger announced itself. She had not seen this. He moved through the situation the way water moves through a narrow channel, finding every available path, filling it completely, without hesitation or wasted motion, or anything that looked like effort. The second man came at him hard and fast. Ryu caught the arm at the elbow, redirected the full momentum of it, and drove the man into the wall with a single controlled motion that looked almost quiet from a distance, except for the sound it produced and the way the man did not get back up. The third man looked at what was left standing, made a calculation, and grabbed Yemi from behind, an arm across her throat, her body as leverage. The specific geometry of a man who understood that sometimes the most effective weapon in a room is the thing the other person cannot afford to lose. The corridor went absolutely still. Every sound stopped. Ryu Hyunjae turned and looked at the man holding Yemi. And the expression on his face in that moment was something she would not forget for as long as she lived. Not rage, nothing as readable or as human as rage. Something colder than that, more deliberate. The specific look of a man running calculations about consequences and finding every number in every column completely acceptable. Finding the man currently breathing against her hair the least significant variable in any equation he was solving. "Let her go," he said, quietly. "The way you say something when you have already decided what happens in the world where the answer is no." The man hesitated. That was the mistake. Ryu crossed the space between them before the hesitation finished, and what happened in the 4 seconds that followed was precise and final, and left the man on the floor, and left Yemi stepping away from him with her pulse hammering so hard she could feel it in her back teeth. Ryu's eyes found hers immediately, before anything else, before the security team, before the room. "Are you hurt?" Not a question, a demand for one specific piece of information. "No," she said. He held her gaze for a beat longer than the answer required. Something passed between them in that beat that had no name, and needed none. Then he turned to his security team and began issuing instructions in a tone so level and so precise, it could have been a briefing about the following morning's calendar. Yemi sat back down at her desk, picked up her pen. Her hands were completely steady. She noticed that, filed it in a place she would examine later. Neither of them spoke about what had happened, and this became one more entry in the vocabulary between them. The acknowledgement that something had shifted without submitting it to the indignity of being named and managed and processed out loud. But it had shifted, irrevocably. She felt it in the way he now positioned himself between her and any open doorway when they walked the corridor together. Not dramatically, not with announcement, simply as a matter of positioning that happened every time. In the way his eyes found her first when he entered a room she was already in. In the small, deliberate adjustments he made to her workload on the days she arrived carrying something behind her eyes that she had not spoken about, and he had not asked about, and he accommodated silently anyway. She felt it in herself with a clarity she could no longer comfortably deny. The way she had started listening for his footsteps in the morning before he appeared, that specific, even unhurried cadence that she now recognized the way you recognize something that has been part of your daily environment, long enough to become part of you. The way the office felt different on the days he was not in it. Not quieter, not more peaceful, just less like itself. Like a room that had lost its center of gravity and did not know what to do about that yet. The way her body kept making decisions without consulting her, turning toward him in shared spaces, finding reasons to extend conversations past their necessary length, noticing the exact way his jaw tightened when something frustrated him, and the specific sound of his exhale when a problem resolved, and the way he held a glass, and the way he said her name, and the way he looked at her sometimes from across a room when he thought she was not looking. She was always looking. She filed none of it anywhere useful. One evening, 4 weeks in, well past 9, the building dark and quiet and entirely theirs, he appeared in the doorway of his office and looked at her at her desk and said, "You have not eaten." "I ate at lunch," she said without looking up from her screen. "It is past 9, he said. "I am aware of the time," she said. A pause that lasted long enough to mean something. "There is a restaurant 2 streets from here," he said. "The food is good." She looked up. He was looking at her with that face, the one that surrendered nothing and somehow communicated everything. "Are you asking me to dinner?" she said. "I am informing you that food exists within walking distance," he said. "What you do with that information belongs entirely to you." She looked at him across the office for a long, quiet moment. Then she saved her work, picked up her coat. They walked the 2 streets in a silence that was not uncomfortable. The particular silence of 2 people who had stopped needing to fill space with sound to justify being in it together. The restaurant was small and warm, and the owner greeted Ryu with the careful deference of someone with a long, practiced history of being exactly that around him. They sat across from each other at a corner table, and the candle between them threw warm light across his face, and across the tattoos at his neck. And Yemi looked at her hands on the table, and silently reminded herself of several important things that she then proceeded to forget the moment he spoke. "Why did you offer me a job that night?" she said. He was quiet for a moment. "You did not fall," he said. She looked up. "Most people in that situation collapse or perform. You did neither. You absorbed the weight of it and you walked out under your own power." He picked up his glass. "I needed someone who could do that." "That is a very particular thing to notice about a stranger," she said. "I notice particular things," he said. She held his gaze across the candlelight. "And what else have you noticed?" she said. The question landed between them, and neither moved, and the candle held steady between their faces, and the restaurant moved quietly around them. And Ryu Hyunjae looked at her across the small distance of that table. With dark eyes, she had spent 4 weeks learning to read and said nothing for long enough, that the nothing became its own specific answer. "Eat," he said finally. She looked down at her food, did not let him see the corner of her mouth move. The dinner stretched longer than any dinner needed to stretch. The conversation moved through professional territory and then past it into something less guarded. Dry, precise observations, carefully offered perspectives, the particular understated humor of 2 people too controlled to be openly funny, but unable to suppress it entirely when they were this close to each other for this long. She laughed once, a real one, unguarded, unexpected, at something dry he said about a mutual contact. And he watched her laugh with an expression that existed on his face for only half a second before the wall came back up. But she caught it, and she held it like something valuable. Walking back through the Seoul cold, she stepped on wet pavement and his hand caught her elbow before she had even processed the stumble. Fast, certain, warm, and he did not remove it immediately. They walked 3 more steps before he did. They both noticed. Neither said anything. But that night, lying in her apartment with the city glowing against her ceiling, Yemi pressed both hands over her face and breathed out slowly into the dark and said the truth to herself for the first time, without softening it or filing it somewhere manageable. She was falling for this man, this dangerous, restrained, dark-eyed man who saw her with a specificity that nobody had managed in longer than she could honestly account for, who had watched her refuse to fall in a room full of people, and decided that was something worth pursuing. Who pushed her relentlessly and matched her when she pushed back, and had never once treated her like something that needed protecting from the truth of what he was. She lay in the dark with that truth and did not fight it. And somewhere across Seoul, in an office on the 14th floor of a building that announced nothing about itself, a man stood at a window with a glass of whiskey untouched between his fingers and looked out at the city spread below him, and thought about a woman who had not broken when everything around her expected her to, and acknowledged, quietly, privately, in the specific way of a man unaccustomed to acknowledging things he could not control, that he was in dangerous territory, and that for the first time in a very long time, he did not entirely want to leave it. That was the week Shin Jun-ho came back. Yemi was moving through the early evening crowd near the office, coat pulled close, mind still half inside the day's work, when she heard her name cut through the noise of the street. She turned, and there he was. Expensive coat, fresh cut, the posture of a man who had revised his own story so many times that he had begun to genuinely believe the version where he was not the villain, where he was simply a man who had made a mistake, where the woman he had publicly destroyed in a room full of people owed him the dignity of hearing him explain it. He looked at her, and his eyes moved over her face with an expression she recognized, that particular mixture of surprise and hunger that men produce when a woman they discarded has become something they did not anticipate. "Yemi," he said. She said nothing. "You look," he started. "Do not," she said. "I just need to talk to you," he said. He stepped toward her. "What I said that night, I was wrong. I know that. I have thought about nothing else, and I need you to hear that You need me to nothing," she said. "Yemi." He reached out and closed his hand around her wrist. Every cell in her body recoiled with a violence that did not reach her face. "Remove your hand," she said. Her voice was completely even. That steadiness, the one she had built in the rubble he had left behind, turned back toward him now like something he had accidentally sharpened for her. "Just listen to me for 1 minute. Is there a problem?" The voice came from directly behind her. Low, even, carrying the specific quality of a question that was not actually a question at all. Shin Jun-ho's eyes moved past Yemi's face to whatever they found standing behind her, and the color left them so quickly it was almost remarkable to watch. His hand dropped from her wrist without another word needing to be said. Ryu Hyunjae stood behind Yemi with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on Shin Jun-ho, and that expression, the calculating one, the one that ran numbers about consequences and found them all acceptable, directed with complete precision at the man standing in front of her. "No," Shin Jun-ho said. His voice had shed every layer it had arrived with. "No problem." He left, did not look back. Yemi stood on the pavement and breathed through her nose and kept her face forward, and did not turn around immediately, because she needed the seconds to locate herself inside her own body again. When she turned, Ryu was watching her with that expression, the one that meant he was reading past the surface of what she was showing him and finding what she had not offered. "I did not need that," she said. "I know," he said. "I was handling it," she said. "I know that too," he said. She looked at him standing there in the evening cold with the city moving around them both. This man, this dangerous, contained, precise man, who had watched her refuse to fall and followed her out into the night and offered her something she had not known she needed, and something cracked open in her chest quietly and without drama. The specific feeling of being seen by someone who is not pretending not to see you, who has never once looked away. "Thank you," she said, quietly, meaning all of it. He nodded once. They walked back through the Seoul evening side by side, and the space between their arms was close enough that she could feel the warmth of him against the cold, and she did not move away, and he did not move away, and the city flowed around them, and neither of them said another word. But that night something inside Yemi that had been sealed shut since the night of the gathering, finally, quietly, without permission or ceremony, opened. Not recklessly, not all the way, just enough to let something other than pain occupy the space. She lay in her apartment in the dark, and for the first time since Shin Jun-ho had taken her apart in that room, she did not press her hand to her chest to hold something in. She let it breathe. She let herself want something again. And that, after everything, felt like the most dangerous and the most necessary thing she had done in a very long time. The thing about falling for someone dangerous is that it does not announce itself the way you expect it to. It does not arrive with warning or ceremony or the particular clarity that would allow you to make a sensible decision about it before it is already too late. It arrives in the ordinary moments, in the way a man hands you a document without touching your hand, but stands close enough that you feel the warmth of him through the air between you, in the way he says your name, not often, never carelessly, only when he means to, and the specific way that lands somewhere in your chest that you cannot locate precisely enough to defend. Yemi had spent 5 weeks telling herself she was being professional. She was not being professional. She was being a woman who had been broken open by one man and was now standing dangerously close to another, and trying to convince herself that the heat she felt in that proximity was something manageable, something she could file away and return to later when circumstances were different and the ground was steadier. She was failing at the convincing. Monday morning of the 6th week, she arrived at 7:30, 15 minutes earlier than her usual 7:45. Not because the work demanded it, not because anything had changed in the schedule, but because she had woken at 5 and lain in the dark for 2 hours, and eventually admitted to herself that she wanted to be in that building. He was already there. He was always already there. She walked to her desk and set down her bag and looked up and found him standing in the doorway of his office, watching her with those dark eyes and that expression that surrendered nothing and somehow communicated everything. "You are early," he said. "Traffic was light," she said. He looked at her for a moment. "There is coffee," he said. She looked at her desk. A cup sat there, still warm, placed recently, placed by a man who had known she was coming 15 minutes before she was supposed to arrive, and had prepared for it without being asked, and without making anything of it. She sat down, did not say thank you out loud. But when she picked up the cup, she looked across at him in the doorway, and something passed between them in the silence that was warmer than gratitude, and more loaded than either of them was prepared to acknowledge at 7:30 on a Monday morning. He went back into his office. She wrapped both hands around the cup and stared at her screen and told herself to focus. She focused on almost nothing for the next 20 minutes. The work that week had a different texture. Not in volume. The demands remained as relentless as ever. But in the space between them while the work was happening. Something had shifted since the dinner and the street confrontation, and the accumulated weight of every moment between them that had been building like pressure behind a wall that was still holding, but had begun to feel everything pressing against it from the other side. He started finding reasons to come to her desk, not manufactured ones, documents he could have sent through the system that he brought himself instead, questions he could have messaged that he asked in person, standing at the corner of her workspace with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on her face, and that particular stillness she had learned to read as something other than indifference. She started finding reasons to be in his office, briefings she could have sent by email that she delivered herself, updates she brought in person and stood across the desk from him and waited while he read them, using the time to study the concentration on his face and the way his jaw moved slightly when he was processing something complex and the way his hands looked on the page. They were circling each other, both of them knowing it, neither of them saying it. And then, on a Wednesday afternoon, it cracked. She had been preparing briefing materials for an important evening meeting, 3 hours of solid work, and she had made an error. Not large, not catastrophic, but the kind Ryu Hyunjae would notice. She caught it herself 4 minutes after sending the document through. She walked into his office. "There is an error in the briefing. Section 2. Wrong source for the third quarter figures. I have the correction ready." He looked up. "When did you find it?" he said. 4 minutes ago, immediately after sending." "And you came directly," he said. "Yes," she said. He looked at her for a long moment, something moving in his expression that she could not fully read. "Most people would have corrected it quietly and hoped I did not notice," he said. "I am not most people," she said. "No," he said. "You are not." The way he said it was not a conventional compliment. It was something more direct, the acknowledgement of something observed across enough time to be certain of. She stood across the desk from him in the particular awareness of distance that had become impossible to ignore, close enough to see the detail of the tattoos above his collar, close enough that if either of them moved it would mean something irreversible. And neither of them moved, and the silence held something the room was too small to contain properly. Then his phone rang. She placed the corrected document on his desk and left. Stood outside his door for 3 seconds with her eyes closed. Then went back to her desk and put her entire attention into the work, and kept it there for the rest of the afternoon through sheer force of will. The meeting that evening ran long. Yemi sat to Ryu's left at a long table in a private room of a restaurant that had no public menu, surrounded by men whose names she recognized from the kind of news that did not remain published. She managed the documents, read the silences, adjusted accordingly, all of it with the precision that had become her standard. An hour in, the silver-haired man across the table looked at her with an assessment that had nothing to do with her professional function. He said something in Korean that made the men nearest him smile. Yemi's Korean was better than anyone in that room knew. She understood every word. She set her pen down, looked at him directly, responded in clean, precise Korean that made the smile leave his face so completely it might never have been there. The table went quiet. Ryu Hyunjae, seated to her right, did not visibly react, but she felt the shift in him, his stillness changing quality, tightening, focusing. The meeting continued. Afterward, walking back through the Seoul night to where the car waited, Ryu said nothing for half a block. Then, "What did you say to him?" he said. "I told him his opinion of what I was doing in that room was less interesting to me than the document in my hand, and that if he had something relevant to contribute, he should do it quickly because my time was unavailable for anything else." "In Korean," he said. "In Korean," she said. "You have been hiding how well you speak," he said. "I was waiting to see if it was necessary," she said. He looked at her as they walked, and she felt that look the way you feel heat from a distance. Present, radiating, impossible to pretend you did not feel. "It was necessary," he said. "I know," she said. They reached the car. He opened the door, not with ceremony, simply doing it. And she got in, and he got in beside her, and the car moved into the Seoul traffic, and neither spoke for several minutes, and the silence between them was the specific kind between two people thinking about the same thing, and both aware that the other is thinking it, and neither willing to say it first. She turned her head and found him already looking at her. 3 full seconds. Neither looked away. Then his phone rang. She looked back out at the city lights bleeding past the window, and breathed carefully and said nothing. The first time he touched her with intention was not dramatic. A Tuesday evening, late, the building empty around them. She had been reviewing contracts for 3 hours, and her neck had locked in a position that was communicating its intention to stay there permanently. She stood and rolled her neck and pressed her hand against the base of it, and made a sound she would not have made if she had known he was standing in the doorway watching her. He crossed the room. "Stay still," he said. "I am fine," she said. "You are not," he said. "Stay still." His hands came to her shoulders, not tentative, not asking permission after the offer had been made. Present, warm, certain, careful with the specific care of someone paying close attention to what they are doing and why. He worked the tension out of her neck and shoulders with a focus that was almost clinical, except that nothing about his hands on her felt clinical, and they both knew it, and neither pretended otherwise. She stood completely still. Her eyes were open, and in the dark window ahead of her, she could see his reflection, the focus on his face, the tattoos at his neck, the expression she had never seen on him before, something unguarded, something that had stopped hiding from her. His hands stilled on her shoulders. Neither moved. She could feel his breath at the back of her head, the warmth of him directly behind her, the specific charged silence of a moment standing at the exact edge of something that cannot be walked back from. "Yemi," he said. "Not yet," she said softly. Not pulling away, not moving at all. "Not yet." A beat. "Not yet," he repeated, like placing something somewhere specific to retrieve later. He removed his hands, stepped back. She turned and looked at him, and he looked at her, and the thing between them, enormous, unnamed, patient, hung in the air between their faces, waiting for permission neither of them was ready to give yet. "Good night," she said. "Good night," he said. She walked to the elevator and rode it down alone, and stood in the lobby with her back against the wall and her eyes closed. Not yet, but soon. Both of them knew it. Then the trouble found her. Not at the office this time. Not through the front door with men who announced their intentions through the way they moved. This trouble was quieter, more personal, the kind that understood exactly where to aim. She was leaving the building alone on a Thursday evening. Ryu was in a meeting that was running long, and she had told him she would take a car when they were waiting for her outside. Two men, positioned on either side of the building exit with the patient stillness of people who had been there a while and were not in a hurry. She registered them half a second before they moved. Half a second was enough. She turned back toward the building entrance, and the first man covered the distance between them faster than she anticipated, and caught her arm and pulled her sideways into the narrow service alley that ran alongside the building, and everything in her body went cold and sharp and completely focused. "We are not here to hurt you," he said in Korean. "Then let go of my arm," she said in Korean. He did not let go. "We have a message for Ryu Hyunjae," he said. "You are going to deliver it." "I am not going to do anything," she said. The second man appeared at the alley entrance behind her. She assessed. Two men, confined space. No immediate exit behind her. The building entrance approximately 8 meters ahead past the first man. She drove her elbow backward into the second man's sternum with everything she had. He did not expect it. The grip on her arm loosened for exactly 1 second. 1 second was what she needed. And she pulled free and moved toward the building entrance, and got 4 steps before the first man caught her from behind. What happened next happened fast. The building door opened. Ryu Hyunjae came through it with 2 of his security team behind him, and the situation in the alley reorganized itself completely in the space of approximately 10 seconds. Not cleanly, not without violence. The kind of close-quarters physical confrontation that left marks on walls and men on the ground, and a specific quality of silence afterward that meant something definitive had been communicated. Ryu reached Yemi. His hands went to her face before anything else, tilting her chin up, reading her eyes, checking her with a directness that had nothing professional left in it whatsoever. "Are you hurt?" he said. "My arm," she said. "I am fine." His jaw tightened. He looked at the man on the ground nearest them, and something passed over his face that she had seen once before, in the corridor the first time. That cold, calculating expression that ran numbers about consequences, and found every result acceptable. "Get them up," he said to his security team, quietly. The way he said everything that was not actually quiet at all. He kept one hand at Yemi's back as he said it. She noticed that. The hand staying. The deliberate contact. The statement it made without a single word. The men were taken inside. She never found out what happened to them in any specific detail, and she did not ask. That night, Ryu sat across from her in his office with 2 glasses on the desk between them, and poured without asking. She took the glass. "They were contracted," he said. "Not local. Someone is escalating." "To what end?" she said. "To reach me through you," he said, "which means they believe you matter to me." The sentence sat between them. "Do I?" she said. He looked at her across the desk. "You know the answer to that," he said. She did. She had known it for weeks, had been living alongside the knowledge of it and filing it carefully and refusing to examine it directly, the way you refuse to look directly at something bright, because you know what will happen to your vision afterward. She picked up the glass and drank and set it back down. "Then we have a problem," she said. "Yes," he said, "we do." "What do we do about it?" she said. "You move," he said. "Tonight. I have a residence with full security. You stay there until this resolves." "I am not," she started. "Yemi." The name, the specific way he said it, stopping her completely. "I will not negotiate on this," he said. On anything else? Yes. On this? No. She looked at him for a long moment. This is not you protecting me, she said. This is someone using me to get to you. Yes, he said, which is exactly why you are moving tonight. She went home, packed a bag, came back. The residence was quiet and fortified in ways that were not visible until you looked for them. She had her own rooms, her own space. The arrangement was professional in its structure. Living in proximity to Ryu Hyun-jae was a different thing from working in proximity to him, and the threat did not go quiet simply because she had moved somewhere safer. On the third evening, a car followed theirs back from the office. Not subtly, which meant it was intended to be seen. A message dressed as surveillance. Ryu's driver handled it with practiced efficiency, taking 3 unnecessary turns until the car behind them understood that it had been identified and disappeared into the Seoul traffic. Yemi watched the side mirror until it was gone. Does this happen often? She said. More often now, Ryu said. They are testing responses. Testing what specifically? She said. How much you mean to me, he said. How far I will move to protect you. What I will sacrifice to keep you out of the crossfire. She looked at him in the back of the car, with the city moving past outside, and the particular intimacy of danger shared in an enclosed space, and said, And what will you sacrifice? She said. He looked back at her. More than is strategically advisable, he said. She held his gaze. The car moved through Seoul in the dark. Neither of them looked away. The evenings in the residence became something she did not have a word for. She cooked sometimes. The kitchen in the residence was properly equipped, and cooking had come back to her gradually over the previous weeks. First the willingness, then the desire, then the specific pleasure of standing in a warm kitchen with something building on the stove, and music playing low from her phone, and the whole apartment smelling like something that meant she was present and alive and feeding herself again. The first time she cooked in the residence, she made enough for 2 without consciously deciding to. He ate without ceremony, and with the attention of someone who had not been cooked for in a long time, and was not certain how to receive it gracefully. You can say it is good, she said. It is good, he said immediately, and then looked slightly surprised at his own speed. She turned back to the counter so he would not see her face. But the evenings were not only warm. The threat that had followed them into the residence followed them into the evenings too. Phone calls that he took in low, urgent Korean. Security briefings that disrupted dinner. One night when 3 of his people arrived unannounced at 10, and the conversation that followed was conducted in the study with the door closed, and lasted 2 hours while she sat in the kitchen and listened to the tone of voices she could not hear clearly, and felt the specific anxiety of knowing that something was developing, that she was not fully inside yet. When the door opened and his people left, he came to the kitchen and stood in the doorway and looked at her. Tell me, she said. Someone inside my organization has been passing information, he said. Someone close. Someone trusted. How close, she said. Close enough to know your movement patterns, he said. Close enough to have given the men outside the building the timing of your exit. She was very still. The men who grabbed me, she said. They knew I would be leaving alone. Yes, he said. Someone told them, she said. Yes, he said. She sat with this. You are looking at everyone, she said. Everyone, he said. She nodded slowly. He came to the table and sat across from her and poured tea into both cups that had been sitting there cooling and pushed one toward her, and she wrapped her hands around it, and they sat together in the kitchen in the late evening, with the threat sitting in the room between them like a third presence, and the warmth of the kitchen holding against it. I am not afraid, she said. I know, he said. I am angry, she said. I know that too, he said. Good, she said. He almost smiled. The rooftop happened on a Friday. He came to her in the evening with something different in his expression. Not the professional weight she had learned to read or the danger assessment focus she had seen in crisis moments, but something quieter than either of those. Something that had been building for a long time and had apparently decided that Friday was the night it was no longer willing to wait. Come, he said. Where? She said. Somewhere that is not inside, he said. They drove out of the residential district and ended up somewhere she did not recognize. A rooftop she had never seen, high above a part of Seoul that blazed below them in every direction, with the specific indifferent beauty of a city that does not notice you watching it. They stood at the railing side by side and looked out at it, and the wind came across the open space and moved through her hair, and she stood in it and felt something ease inside her chest that had been tight for a long time. I grew up looking at the city from the bottom, he said. She turned slightly to look at his profile. Every person in it looked like they had somewhere to be that was better than where I was, he said. She said nothing, listening. I made a decision at 17, he said, about what kind of man I was going to be, what I was willing to do to become that man. Do you regret it? She said. I regret some things, he said, not the decision. She looked at him against the lit city sky, the sharp jaw, the blonde in his dark hair catching the ambient light, the tattoos disappearing beneath his collar, and felt the specific weight of a man offering her something real. Why are you telling me this? She said. He turned and looked at her. Because you told me something once, he said, without any words. You told me you were not going to fall, that you were going to take whatever came at you and stay standing. A pause that contained everything. I have been watching you do exactly that for 2 months, and I think you deserve to know that someone was watching, and that it mattered. The city moved below them. Ryu Hyunjae, she said. Yemi, he said. If you're about to say something you cannot take back, she said, then say it. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear with a gentleness that seemed to move through his whole body when he did it, like something releasing. His hand stayed at her jaw, warm, certain, his thumb at her cheekbone reading the warmth of her face, like something he had been waiting to reach for a long time. She covered his hand with hers. They stood like that above Seoul, with the whole city spread out beneath them, witnessing nothing because it was too busy being itself to look up. And they stayed in that moment for as long as it needed to last, without either of them reaching for anything more. I'm not good at this, he said quietly. Neither am I, she said. Not anymore. Then we will be bad at it together, he said. She almost laughed. He pressed his forehead against hers, and the city breathed below them, and the wind moved between them, and they stood together in the dark, above everything that had tried to break them separately, and had not managed it, and had brought them here instead, to this rooftop, to this moment, to each other. 3 days later, the photograph arrived, a package, addressed to Yemi specifically. Inside, a single photograph of the two of them on the rooftop, his hand at her jaw, hers covering his, taken from a distance that required planning. Below it, 4 words in English. She is not safe. Yemi looked at it, picked it up, put it down, picked it back up. Her hands were not shaking. She walked into his office and placed it on his desk without speaking. He looked at it. The stillness that came over him was not ordinary stillness. It was the recalibration of a man who had just had a variable introduced into an equation he had been managing carefully, and found the variable unacceptable. Who else has seen this? He said. No one. I brought it directly. Are you afraid? He said. I am angry, she said. Good, he said. He made 2 calls, short, precise, activating something that had been prepared and waiting. When he put the phone down, he looked at her with an expression that moved between fury and a tenderness so tightly controlled, it barely registered on the surface. I am going to find who sent this, he said. And when I do... I know, she said. He looked at her. You are not worried about what I will do, he said. No, she said. A beat. You should be, he said. Maybe, she said, but I am not. The investigation moved fast. Within 4 days they had a name. Within 6 a location. On the 7th evening, Ryu came to her with something in his expression. She had learned to read as the weight of information that changes the shape of everything. Sit down, he said. She sat. He sat across from her, elbows on his knees, eyes on her face, the posture of a man who has been preparing to say something and has not finished preparing but is saying it anyway. The photograph, he said. We traced it. And, she said, the person who took it was contracted by an organization working against my interests for approximately 3 years. Okay, she said carefully. The contract was not new, he said. It has been running since before you came to work for me. She looked at him. What are you saying? She said. I am saying the people who want to use you against me have been aware of you for longer than you know. That certain events in your life in the months before you came here may not have been coincidental. The room was very quiet. Shin Jun-ho, she said. He held her gaze. We believe he was approached, Ryu said. We believe what happened at that gathering was not entirely his own decision. The air left her lungs slowly and completely. Someone told him to do that, she said. Someone paid him to destroy me publicly. We believe someone made it worth his while to end the relationship in a way that left you isolated and destabilized, Ryu said, and then ensured that the path from your lowest point led toward me. She was very still. They wanted me broken, she said. They wanted me shattered, so that when I came near you, I would be a liability, a vulnerability. That is our assessment, he said. Who? She said. He looked at her. We are still confirming, he said, but Yemi, I need you to prepare yourself. The answer is someone you already know. Something cold moved through her. Not fear, recognition. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark and went back through everything. Every conversation, every hand held, every tear wiped, every word of comfort offered in the right order at the right moment, and looked at all of it through the lens of what she had just been told. Someone she already knew. Someone who had been there from the beginning. Someone who had watched her fall apart and had shown up every day and had said exactly the right things because she had been prepared to say exactly the right things. She thought about the Saturday in her apartment, the kitchen table, the coffee growing cold, Seo Yon's eyes moving to her phone after Yemi looked away. That half second of something on her face that Yemi had registered and not examined. She thought about how Seo Yon had always known things before being told them. She thought about who had encouraged her to call the number on the card. You cannot stay here like this. Call it. The worst he can say is no. She pressed her hands over her face in the dark. No. The word kept coming and she kept finding more evidence attached to it each time. At 3 a.m, she got up, walked to Ryu's room, knocked. He opened the door immediately, which meant he had not been sleeping either. She looked at him. Seo-yeon, she said. His face told her everything. He already knew. He had known before he came to her this evening, had not been able to bring himself to say the name. She understood why. She did not blame him for it. And she also felt the floor of everything she had built her understanding of the world on shift beneath her feet, with a completeness she had no existing framework to absorb. How long? She said. 2 days, he said. And you did not tell me, she said. I was trying to find a way, he said. There is no good way, she said. No, he said. There is not. She stood in the doorway of his room in the 3 a.m. dark and felt the specific grief of a betrayal that comes from the place you never thought to guard. Not a lover. Not a man who had failed her in the ordinary ways men failed women. A friend. The person who had shown up every day when she stopped eating and stopped speaking and stopped existing out loud. The shoulder she had wept on. The hands that had held hers through the worst of it. Those same hands had built the worst of it. The person who had wiped her tears had caused them. She did not cry. She was too far past that version of herself to cry at this. She stepped into the room and Ryu stepped back to let her in. And she sat on the edge of the chair by the window and looked out at the sleeping city. And he sat across from her and they stayed like that in the dark without speaking. And it was the most honest and the most painful and the most necessary silence she had ever sat inside. At some point his hand found hers on the arm of the chair. She turned her palm up. He held it. And they sat together above Seoul in the 3 a.m. dark and waited for morning the way people wait for things that are necessary and unavoidable and already decided. Not with dread, not with hope, but with the specific readiness of 2 people who have been broken before and know that broken is not the same thing as finished. Morning came. It always did. And when it came, Yemi was still there. Still standing. Still herself. And the man beside her, dangerous and complicated and more honest with her than anyone had managed in longer than she could measure, was still holding her hand. Whatever came next, she was not facing it alone. And Seoyeon was going to answer for every single thing she had done. If you made it to the end of this story, then you sat with Yemi through every single moment it cost her to get here. Through the public humiliation, through the silence of a broken woman who stopped eating, stopped speaking, stopped existing out loud. Through a dangerous man who saw her worth before she remembered it herself. Through a best friend who turned out to be her deepest wound. And through an ending she never planned for but always deserved. Some of you watching this are somewhere in the middle of your own version of this story. You have not reached your ending yet. The betrayal is still fresh. The humiliation still replays at night. But you are still here, still moving, and that means everything. Drop your city in the comments. Let us see how far Yemi's story traveled today. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that being seen is still possible, even after everything. And subscribe. Because every single week we come back here and we tell stories about women who are underestimated, discarded, and rebuilt themselves into something nobody saw coming. Yemi did it. And so can you.